Amen. How many, this is pretty easy, how many of you say like you have something or someone that you love, right? That you absolutely love. Really only 6 people. So everybody's like, yeah, I do not like my parents, right? Let's try this again. How many of you have someone or something that you love? Raise your hand. There we go. Class participation, 100%. Let's go. Right? You have someone or something that you love. And the way that we often measure that, right, is that if you love someone or if you love something, it's going to get your time. Everybody say time. It's going to get your money. Everybody say money. And it's going to get your attention. Everybody say attention. Those are some of the easy measurements to really put into perspective that when we love someone or that when we love something, that it's going to get our time, our money, and our attention, right? To give you some practical examples of how that's played out in my life is, especially when I was growing up, I loved basketball. Loved basketball. I got beat before I came to preach tonight, but we won't talk about that. We'll keep going, right? But I love basketball, and at that time, I really loved basketball, especially when I was in my middle school years. And I remember when it was time for basketball season, I was going to all the practices that I could go to, even the extra ones that aren't even mandatory. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Like the extra ones that are like, they're not really mandatory, but it's kind of like that thing with the coach is like, do you really want playing time? Do you really want me to invest in you? Then you probably need to go, right? It's kind of probably not the best tactic, a little bit manipulative. But anyways, right? We'll go into, but like I remember I was going to those practices because I just loved it, right? And I remember even when I wasn't at the scheduled practices, I was outside, no matter if it was sunny or if it was rainy, I'm out there shooting the basketball. I'm pretending that I got Kobe Bryant on my team, I was one of those guys, like, nobody was outside with me in the rain, so I had to put some people there. Okay, some of y'all are like, Josh, that's a little strange. We'll keep moving. But it's an example because I was doing all of those things, going to all the practices and practicing even in my backyard on unscheduled times to practice. It had my time. I remember asking my parents, like, hey, can I get some wristbands? Can I get a headband? Can I get like a knee brace? I don't even need a knee brace, right? But I just see people in the NBA, they have like knee braces. So can I get that, right? Can I get extra basketball shorts? Can I get new basketballs? And I remember I was like, man, mom, can you get this for me? Dad, can you get this for me? It got not my money at the time, but my parents' money, time, money. And I remember just sitting in school, especially when I would have a big game coming up, I'm just running through plays in my mind. I'm running through, just the drills that I had maybe been working on in practice or even outside of practice at my house. And I would just be in school like I was there, but I was thinking about basketball. I was thinking about the game. I was getting prepared mentally. Time, money, attention. Moving on into later in life, when I started dating Annabelle, I really probably need to start running these stories by you before it's all right, learning lesson. Somebody, Chris, can you take note of that and send it to me after? All right. But when Annabelle started and I started dating in the dating process, right? We were hanging out all the time. We're planning stuff to go and do, to go and experience, right? And so Annabelle was getting my time. Second one, when we go plan all these things, who do you think's paying? Me. Y'all, everybody wonders like, man, y'all dated pretty fast and like that was pretty quick. And it was like, yeah, well, I was trying to get to the joint bank account status where it was just like, no, just kidding. Low-key strategic though. But no, it's all right. The Lord confirmed. Okay, I don't need to explain myself even further. But time and what? Money. And then from that, I remember because I'm just head over heels, like in this dating process, still head over heels for my wife, Annabelle, love her. But I remember just like, man, all I'm thinking about is like, man, I get to hang out with Annabelle. I'm going throughout my day and I'm like, man, having lunch with Chris Vaughn over there and we're eating, at Dakota's and Blanchard, eating a great peach cobbler. He's talking to me and I'm like, Annabelle. Time, money, attention. Time, money, attention. See, the majority, or excuse me, when I talk about last week, and when I was reflecting about last week and how I really felt led just to kind of do a part 2 of what we started on, I really wanted to reflect on this point that we had last week. And this point was, don't let the pursuit of good things in life compete with the greatest thing in life, which is your relationship with God. And if you missed last week, you can go check it out on YouTube or Spotify. But as I was pondering just kind of that thought, I just kept thinking about how everything in this world is competing for your attention. And not just your attention, it's competing for your love. It's competing for your love. Because if you get to love something or someone, you know that they know, and whoever knows that it's gonna get your time. Say it, time and attention. And we live in this world where and here's the thing, how do we know this to be true? You're sitting here right now and you're trying to all right, I love Jesus, I'm really trying to lock in, but there's somebody texting you. There's a Snapchat going off. And it's causing you to have this divided focus, a divided attention, right? This divided love where you're trying to do everything and respond to this person, and it takes you out of maybe even being present in this moment. And I want to recap what Revelation chapter 2, what Jesus is saying. He's speaking to the church of Ephesus. And what Jesus does in the beginning is he gives them props, right? You have done this. You've done this. I'm glad that you've done this. You've recognized who false prophets were. Great. But, and what he says is, yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had first, right? They were doing good things, but Jesus gets onto the motive of what they've done it from, and speaks to how they have become distant in their love towards him. See, the church of Ephesus had forgotten their first love, and their first love being God. See, Jesus even tells us about love, and you probably even saw it on our wall when you walked in here tonight. And it's based out of this passage in Matthew 22, verse 36. Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. See, as we aim to pursue spiritual growth, as you're aiming to draw closer to Jesus, to grow in your faith, we must remember our first love. And tonight, I want to talk to you tonight from the place of what it means, and this is the title of the message, to make room for your first love. And see, I really want to take it, last week was really just kind of some theological points for you to grab a hold of. I really want to take also tonight to some practical levels for you to really implement into your week. So how do I make room to go back to my first love, to really love God this year? And I want to give you just a couple of thoughts. The first one is this. I have to say no to something so I can say yes to something better. I have to say no to some things so I can say yes to something better. You have experienced this with your parents, right? Where your parents give you an ultimatum. You can do this, but you can't do this. Y'all ever been there? Right? You can go to your friend's house today, but guess what? If you go there today, you won't be able to go next week. Right? Anybody hate that? Right? You're just like, bro, just let me live my life. Let me go. Let me do what I want. And they give you an ultimatum that ultimately is a struggle for us to make a decision on, right? Because here's the reality. FOMO is real, right? The fear of missing out is real. Why? Because we want to be a part of everything. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Like if you get invited to 8 birthday parties from 8 different friends, you're not like, man, I'm not going to go to that one, you know? You're trying to figure out, how can I make this happen? right? And if there are 8 different birthday parties on the same day, the organizational skills of you in you come out. You're like, well, Mom, you get off work at this time so you can bring me here. Dad, you can actually take me and pick me up here. Okay, then I'll have a friend. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? You tell your parents, I did all the planning for you. We got this, right? But we have this fear of missing out. Why? Because we want to be a part of everything and do everything. We don't want to miss out on hanging out with our friends. We don't want to miss playing sports. We don't want to miss out on potential friendships or relationships. And see, if you want your relationship with God to flourish, you will have to say no to some things that may be good things, not sinful things, right? But things that maybe are taking you away from your first love. There's a classic example that's found in Luke chapter 10. And here we pick up on this conversation with Jesus and Martha. And in Luke chapter 10, verse 38, says this: as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. First off, who are you telling? You telling Jesus to do what? Like, you ain't supposed to be commanding Jesus to do nothing. Like, right? Okay, that's just me. I'm just reading into that. All right. Verse 41. Martha, Martha. Y'all ever been called a name, your like first name by your parent like twice? Right? Like, Nevaeh, Nevaeh. Right? Like, it's like, okay, don't say it anymore. We'll keep moving, right? That's what Jesus said. He said, Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. What's happening here? Jesus has entered Martha's house. And you know this, that when you have people come into your house, how many of you have parents that say, it's time to clean, right? You start seeing all the cleaning products that you didn't even know existed in your house, right? And you were instructed, hey, go ahead, start taking care of like the roof. And you're like, the roof? They're not even gonna see the roof. Get on the roof right now. You're like, okay, right? And so, this is what's happening. Martha is welcoming Jesus into her home. She recognizes to a certain extent of who Jesus is, recognizes him as Lord. And here's what happened is Martha is welcoming Jesus into her home. There's other people, there's Mary in her home, other people. And she's trying to clean and prepare while Jesus is in the room, right? She's not doing something bad. She's not doing a bad thing, but it just wasn't the thing that she needed to be doing in that moment. See, Jesus was in the room, but we read in Matthew, but Martha was distracted. She was distracted, right? I really feel with this generation, your generation, Gen Z, whatever the framework you want to, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, there's a mixture in the room, but I really feel like with this generation, there is a big really stronghold of distraction in your life that has stopped you from really drawing close to God. That everything is trying to get your attention, everybody, right? And so what happens is you're doing things that are not necessarily bad things, right? We talked about last week, God's not asking you to go live at like a monastery, in the Himalayas. He's not asking you to drop football. He's not asking you to stop band, right? The ask is for us to make sure that that doesn't rival the love that we have for God. But yet we live in a world that is filled with things that are distracting us, that make us miss moments like Martha had, where Jesus is in the room, but yet we're distracted by so many other things in life. See, making room for our first love is not about you constantly being in a place of doing, but making room is about getting you to a place of being. Here's what I mean by that. One powerful book that I feel like has really played a pivotal role in my faith was a book outside of the Bible, yes, right? But there's this book called Emotional Healthy Discipleship by a guy named Pete Scazzero. And he talks about this idea and this understanding of embrace your limits. Your limits are a gift. They're not a weakness. My personality, right? I want to go. Let's go. 100 miles per hour. I view any obstacle as just something I need to get through instead of something that's a signal that I'd say that I need to pull back, right? I have that mentality. Some of you have that mentality. And I remember just reading this and I was like, limits. See, I always viewed limits, me having limits, as a form of weakness instead of a form of protection, right? And so I had to really put this into practice even in my own life, because I would want to go 100 miles per hour. I would have the FOMO. I want to do everything. I want to start this, have all these ideas. But yet I started spreading myself so thin. I started getting distracted. And what happened is it started taking me away from my first love, being God. See, understanding the limits I have as a person, that we have as humans, is not a weakness, but it's a form of protection. See, Martha was missing out on an opportunity to be with Jesus. Her time and attention were all about preparing the space, right? She was distracted and she missed out on being present with Jesus, who was in the space already. See, Jesus tells Martha in verse 42 in Luke chapter 10, Mary has chosen what is better. Everybody say better. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. See, here's what Mary did. Mary said no to the preparations that maybe needed to be done so that she could say yes to being with Jesus. Let me say that again. Mary said no to the preparations that needed to be done, but said yes so she could say yes to being with Jesus. So all of her time and attention would be devoted to what was better in that moment. See, when you say no, when you say no, you will miss out on something, when you say no, you will miss out on some things, but it only creates an opportunity for you to say yes to something better. I say no so that it gives me an opportunity to say yes. Make room for your first love. Second thought is this: create boundaries to protect your first love. Create boundaries to protect your first love. A lot of times when we hear the word boundary, right, we automatically go into just romantic relationships, right? We automatically think boundaries are what stop us from doing something, right? From crossing a line, from getting too physical in a relationship. That's a lot of times where our mind goes, to stop us from doing something. But the thing is, if we view boundaries as a rule or a law that is trying to prohibit / stop us from an experience, it's only a matter of time before we cross over. However, boundaries serve as a way to protect. Everybody say protect. Relationships, for an example, boundaries are there to protect your commitment to honor your body, which is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and to be holy as He is holy, right? It's to protect you, right? If we all have just, you know what I'm talking about. When someone says you can't do something, you're like, watch me, right? When someone says stop doing this, like stop clicking your pen, right? One more time. And what can happen is a lot of times we can view boundaries as a way of trying to stop us from doing something, but really a really healthy way of viewing boundaries is a way to protect you. A way to protect. See, what does this have to do with making room for my love for God? Because if you don't create boundaries to protect your time with God, then it's only a matter of time before something will rival that love and consume your time and your attention. If you're not creating boundaries when it comes to protecting your time with God, if you're not creating boundaries when it comes to protecting the attention that you give God, then something's gonna start sneaking up to try to rival that, to try to get more of your time, more of your money, and more of your attention. See, Jesus even mentions something like this in Matthew chapter 6. He's talking about treasure in heaven. And he says this in verse 24, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot serve both God and whatever else is trying to get on the throne of your heart. See, when I create boundaries, I am protecting the relationship I have with God, where my time and my focus is totally devoted to Him. He says also in this same passage in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. My treasure equaling my time, my attention. Create boundaries to protect your first love. And I say this so strongly about creating these boundaries because I can't remember the quote exactly, but it's like if you don't make a plan, Chris, you know, if you don't make a plan, if you don't plan, you plan to fail, something like that, right? If you're not basically setting the principle of like, if you're not planning to create boundaries, you're gonna fail to even have them in the first place, right? And so my challenge to you when it comes to this part of creating boundaries that protect your relationship with God, that you would view the boundary as not something that's stopping you from trying to do something, but view the boundary that you're creating as a form of protection to protect you and the love that you have for God. So we go back to Revelation chapter 2, verse 4 through 5, as we conclude. Jesus says, yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. Consider how far you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. See, Jesus was speaking to the church in Ephesus, but there is a timeless call for the people of God to return to their first love. And as Jesus said, do the thing you did at first. Do the thing you did at first. Can we do this? Can we just close our eyes for a moment? And for those of you that are followers of Jesus in the room, I just want you to close your eyes and I want you to reflect that moment when you made a decision to follow Jesus, when you made a decision to go all in. I want you to remember how excited you were. I want you to remember how many times you were just listening to worship in your room. I want you to remember that when crazy things came up in life, you didn't respond by just frustration and just, turning on some depressing music, but you turned on worship. I want you to remember the time where you didn't view reading the Bible as a chore, but you viewed it as an opportunity to know God more. I want you to remember when you were carefree, when you were so excited, so deeply in love with God that you didn't care about raising your hands in worship and what people thought, you just did it. Open your eyes. Imagine that just reflection moment that you had just within yourself. Imagine if you just made that a daily posture in your heart. Imagine if you said, you know what? God, I'm returning to you. God, you are what is gonna have my time. You're gonna have money. You're gonna have my attention. See, having Jesus in an unrivaled space within your heart where he is your first love allows you a couple of things. First, it allows you to have discernment when it comes to things trying to get your time, money, and attention. And it allows you to walk with an increased awareness to honor God in everything you do and love his people, right? So coming back to your first love is not saying abandon everything that you're doing right now or everything that you're a part of, but it is saying, and what Jesus is wanting from us, is for us to center our lives in everything that we do on this earth, everything that's really just temporary, the sports, different things like that, but center it around him. When you're on social media, when it's just taking up so much of your time, guess what? Pray, Holy Spirit, give me awareness in this moment to not be so caught up with the social media, with Snapchat, with Instagram, things that are just trying to get my time where it's taking away my time from you, Lord. See, my deep love for God means he gets my time, my money, and my attention. From my deep love for God and being with him, it allows me to be, for me personally, a better husband, a father, a pastor, and friend, because I operate in those roles by being totally dependent on God to lead me and his love to help me grow me into the man that he has called me to be and who he's called Josh to be. Because here's the thing, I've said this multiple different times. I love God more than I love Annabelle. I love God more than I love Shepherd. And it sounds crazy to say that, right? Because we're used to telling people, I love you, everything I have, right? But the only way I can love them well and love them and love Annabelle as my wife and love Shepherd as my son comes from me understanding what God's love is for me and the love that he wants me to show them. It actually helps me love them better, right? I want to challenge us tonight. For some of you in the room, you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, bro, I can definitely relate to what the church of Ephesus was experiencing in that moment of just getting rebuked of, man, I have forgotten my first love. I haven't been doing bad things, but my motives and why I do things, man, I'm just kind of letting things take the throne of my heart. But I believe that Jesus is calling us back. Michael referenced it earlier. He is calling us back to our first love, being him.